Hello and welcome to the Worldbuilders. It's a new podcast. This is our first time ever making one, so if it's a bit rubbish, if our audio's bad, we apologise in advance.
Please forgive
I'm
us.
I'm Sary, and I am joined by
I'm Sean.
a fellow world builder. We're going to be talking about both fantasy and sci-fi. I'm more fantasy, and Sean is more sci-fi in his world building at least. But our tastes differ, I would say,
I
fairly.
would, I would say I am more sci-fi generally, uh,
Yeah,
rather than fantasy.
yeah.
As,
So
as a person,
as a person, as an entity, you are
yeah. As
sci-fi.
a, as a being, I am more sci-fi.
Um, the first thing we're going to talk about, well, our first topic that we're going to talk about, we've chosen to go with world-building sins, which is probably quite a risky play for our first
Some say the
podcast.
deadliest of sins. Some
Yeah,
say.
it's a whole new circle of hell um, for world-building sins. Um,
The
I
one
want to
Dante didn't speak about.
I want to preface it by saying, obviously, not all cliches are bad. Cliches can be used really, really well in everything, and these are our personal ones. If you don't agree with them, that's completely cool. I mean, you're wrong, but uh,
Sary will fight you in an arranged duel
arrange a
at your,
duel at
at your
noon.
convenience.
No, at my convenience, surely. No, no, I'll
Your convenience.
pay the plane ticket, and I will fly to
No.
anywhere in the world to duel you. Um, right. So, do you want to get right into it, or should we bumble some more and talk
I think we
about
should
it?
mumble. Definitely mumble and bumbling. Mumbling and bumbling, as they say.
Actually, let's just talk a little bit. So, how's your day been so far? You doing good at the start of this
Oh,
podcast?
it's on to me.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Oh, there's no one else here. Terrible. Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, haven't died. Wow, I survived another day. Tally that off.
Another day
Uh,
closer to death.
yep, as they say. I don't know who they are, but they say it.
Everyone
Uh,
does. Everyone
them,
dies too. Uh,
mysterious them.
right. I've had a good day. I'm all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
really nice. Ate
good.
loads at the pub. Drank
Yeah,
lots of cider with pictures of pigs on it. That's how you know it's
yeah.
good cider. It's got a picture of a
It's
pig on it.
the finest.
The finest in
Bring me your most piggled cider, good man.
piggled.
Yeah.
So just the first thing. We're going to talk about maps and biomes and why, the things that people do with them and why they're bad. Um,
The things.
I think
Oh,
the first one that needs to be named is badly named places and planets. There's so many, and it's not just we generally just as well to add. We're not going to talk about just kind of world building that people doing as hobbies or personal projects or then starting out. We're talking about everything. So there's plenty of really famous or really well fleshed out franchises that suffer from it. All of these things do, and it's just things that niggle us. Mine is
yeah.
planets that
Yeah,
all
niggle.
have Z's and X's in, or like they've all got the same name, but they've got like X or XVII after them, or something like that.
It's the silent Zs that are thrown in. Silent Xs. Uh, it's
Yeah,
a nice touch. Three X's in a single word, I find. Not
yeah,
really.
it's excellent. Or right, definitely planets, but as well like all generic human capital cities are all named something really similar, and I know that's because they're taking it from I mean all English town names they have like a reason for being the name, right? You have like Newcastle, which is called Newcastle because it's a Newcastle, that kind of thing, and they're totally legitimate things. But I mean, even World of Warcraft does it. Stormwind is very, you know,
Yeah. There are some iconic places that do have rather simple names. Think Old Town in Game of Thrones, Whitestone, similar simple names that are named because of a main aspect of the city. For example, if anyone is familiar with Critical Role, they have a place called Whitestone because that city is famous for its exportation of Whitestone, hence the name. You can simple names like that are completely fine. It's just when it's a bad simple name.
yeah, when it's out of context as well.
Mm,
Like that the names that we're talking about, that they're really fascinating. Like place names that have some kind of link to the place itself. So like you said, Whitestone. That's a really really good example. Or even towns others in Europe. I mean, Stockholm. It's to do with transportation of wood, right? Because that is somewhere where they transported a lot of wood. Things like that, and I find those really interesting. Or when people have like market names and things, or like there's like a street that's called like the old cheese market or something like that.
It always helps when it ties in with what the place is, rather than just a name generated classic fantasy name. Because obviously, think about naming. The people who live there would have named it. Obviously, it is you, the god of the world, naming it, but the people living there would have named it, and they would have had a reason for calling it that, because it's something that sticks. A city name is something that is obviously prevalent and sticks with that city.
Yeah, for sure. So I like it, yeah, when it has some kind of relevance to the place. The other thing for maps and biomes is we have single biome planets. Now, I don't claim to know too much about this because I don't know a lot about sci-fi. It's not really my deal. But I always do wonder, I mean, obviously there are planets even in our solar system that have one biome and they're really inhospitable, but I think that if there's life on a planet, shouldn't there be, more than just it's just all completely barren? Or
It's the thing. It really comes down to the rules of the of the world. And when I say world, I mean the universe as a whole. Take Star Wars for example. It has one of the most famous single biome planets of Hoth, an ice world. It's supposed to be freezing cold. People walk around on it. So it's a rule in that world in the sense that it's an icy planet, but people are fine there. Realistically, if a planet was such that the entire surface is covered with ice, you wouldn't really be walking around on it. But it's overlooked in this context, and that's something that you consider in the general rules, which we'll touch on later. But it's such a thing that, okay, if in your world you have single biome planets, there are a lot of sci-fi works that have such things. Think about Warhammer 40,000 has some. Well, if you're familiar with Warhammer 40,000, has some famous single biome worlds, jungle worlds, wasteland worlds, that kind of thing. It seems to be a staple with sci-fi that such thing is done that way.
Yeah,
it keeps,
definitely.
it gives each world a single identity in a way that if you think of Ice Planet Star Wars, instantly Hoth. You thought of a jungle world in 140,000, you think of Katachan straight away. That kind of thing. It's iconic. In a realistic sense, if a world is inhabitable, as in by humans just walking around without any suits, then chances are it's probably going to have a breathable atmosphere. It's probably going to have biomes within the world itself.
Yeah, of course. I mean, our world's biomes are controlled, by the equator, and then how close we are, how close each place is to, where the sun, well, not how close it is to the sun, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and I mean, obviously there are different things. Again, I'm not a scientist, and nobody who's world building, we're not expecting. I don't think anyone expects you to be like a, astrophysicist to have like a perfect representation of the world. But I think kind of mono settings and monocultures in general are kind of awkward when you really think about them. I mean, in the backdrop of a movie or a book or something, you're probably not thinking about it that much. I mean, it wasn't until I started doing pretty intense world building that I even considered these things. I would just be like, oh, cool, ice planet, And I think, obviously it's got its place and it's still cool. It's not uncool. It's just if you're looking to get into, thinking about your world being a bit more realistic, or you want it to work as a world, then probably single biomes aren't great. But if you're going to put biomes in, don't pull a World of Warcraft and just stick mountains around any region that you don't want it to have a shared or similar biome to the one next to it. Now, I've always wondered about this. Ironforge, if listeners are familiar with World of Warcraft, which a lot of people are, let's be real here, we've all sunk so much of our lives into that game.
So much of my life. Still sinking so much of my life.
Yes,
I continue to sink.
that should just be the title of this podcast. The
Continuing to
Worldbuilders
sink.
continuing to sink. Yeah, but Ironforge, and then right next to it, you've got where is it? It's like the place with Blackrock Mountain. Played it 11 years, still don't know the names of all the zones. I mean, that's like like a lava encrusted wasteland, and then it's like frozen northern mountains. It's like, oh, it's all right though because there's mountains between them, so it's fine.
I think with World of Warcraft, part of that comes down to constraints in a game setting. This is my opinion of it. If, for example, had they made the world realistic proportions, it would take you so long to cross it that you'd get bored, especially at low levels, like pre-mounting levels. You'd be just jogging across Dun Moreau for all of your life. So I think that they've had to definitely scale it down, and they have had to submit to some unrealisms, where the fact of having like a snow area, then a wall, and then the jungle, or something like that.
Yeah,
it isn't as bad as that, but
Yeah, definitely. It's true. And I mean, they have put quite a lot of effort into not making it like that. I mean, really fussy picking out the Ironforge thing, because, you've got, like, in the south of them, you've got things like Ungoro and Kalimdor, and you've got Booty Bay in Eastern Kingdoms. And they are very tropical, and they're similar biomes. So, yeah, I am being a bit unfair with that one. But I have seen maps, on the Worldbuilding subreddit, where they've just got, like, an icy mountain, and then it just goes straight into desert, and it's like, I don't think that's quite right. I mean, and then right, that the worst sin of all, in my mind, when you're talking about biomes and things, is then when someone's like, oh, well, why is it like that? How come, you've got like an icy mountain next to a desert, and they go, oh, well, it's magic. It's a magic icy mountain. It's always cold because there's a dragon that lives under it who died thousands of years ago. And you're like, come on.
It's always cold up Snow Peak.
I mean, the dragon thing is cool, the idea is cool, don't get me wrong, but I don't like it when it's very clear that that's the only reason you've got a dragon sleeping under it that's died, and that's why the world is cold, is because you really couldn't be bothered to move your mountain. You don't want to draw the map again.
It's one of those things that should be used sparingly. Having a feature which is so alien that, say, it was caused by magic, some magical event, a fantastical creature like a dragon, or an accident, some other magical thing. It's the sort of thing you want. The sort of thing I think you should use sparingly. But one or two things in the world. If there's too much, it feels like magic is a bit too rampant. Unless that's what you're going for, in which case, the world may. It seems like if you have so many of these vast centers of magic that have changed the world so much, that it seems like the sort of place where there wouldn't be much civilization because of these vast magical events.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're going for that, then I suppose the rest of the world really needs to reflect that. Like, if you're shaping your whole world with sort of big catastrophical magic events, or I don't even know if that's a real word, but big
it is now. It's been the podcast, so it's a word.
The official word podcast. Stamp that in the dictionary. Just write it in, pen it in the back of my dictionary. But yeah, if you're having these huge cataclysms in your world that are fucking it up. I probably shouldn't swear on the podcast, sorry. Really ruining it. Then, yeah, your world is going to change based on that. You're not just going to have, like, people or, like, Bran the Adventurer or something. But yeah, I'll bring us on to our next point. So we are frequently in this podcast, we are going to get lost and ramble.
There is some rambling. What I was actually going to say is, just going back to the whole rule thing with sci-fi planets. It depends really on the type of sci-fi. Sci-fi and fantasy are two very general terms. Especially with sci-fi, you have different flavors of sci-fi. You have something which a very soft sci-fi, well, like say Star Wars, where the technology isn't really explained. You can see it all works within the world. It feels like it should be there, but it's the sort of thing that wouldn't really work. You know, like a lightsaber wouldn't really work. The way the ships work wouldn't really work. But you can see it. It's cool. Within that world, it feels like it should be there. Then you have hard sci-fi. Hard sci-fi is the sort of thing where it uses real scientific principles. So, for example, the movie Gravity is relatively hard sci-fi. It's like real astronauts, real physics. The book series The Expanse is to a degree hard sci-fi. The ships, they have to factor in like realistic thrust and gravity and things. And either one is cool, whatever you want to do, but that will affect the way you want to build your world. For example, a hard sci-fi world, yeah, sure, we'll have ice planets, but it's the sort of thing you couldn't walk around on like on Hoth.
Yeah,
not to say,
definitely.
yeah, I mean, like you don't have to be a physicist to build a sci-fi world, or a geologist to build a fantasy one. But it's probably good to have some base understandings, maybe a few minute read of a Wikipedia page, perhaps. Something like that. Just so you know
Yeah.
the gist.
Yeah, I would say that actually. You're definitely not expected to be an expert or anything. I mean, that's crazy. But even if you just spend a couple of minutes reading about what it is you're trying to build in the real world, you'll get some sort of basis. And I mean, that's not to say that your world has to be realistic or there has to be realism. It's just, it's really good to get some kind of foundation for ideas, for making new ones. It's like very much like when artists want to draw in, say, anime, or they want to go really stylized, you have to know anatomy first before you can pull, your own style out of that. You have to know how everything joins up, how it connects, things like that. Or you can't really then start to make your own thing that will have basis in this world. Even if you try to make it as different as possible from the world, just because you're a human that lives on planet Earth, you will have things in your world that are from this world. There's no way that you can avoid doing that. But as a good segue onto the next topic, talking about that,
you can segue.
the next big topic we're going to talk about is character and race names, things like that, or just kind of characters and races in general, and big things, world building sins that we don't like in that. Yeah. The big
Should we
one
start
for
with
me.
your favourite?
Oh, my favourite, the one I always go on about, right, is when you're using the name of an existing thing. Do not just spell it differently and then pretend that makes your race different from something else, right? If you spell like goblin, like GHOB''LYNNE, right, that is still a goblin, right? When I say that, it's goblin. They're just goblin. Just spell it like goblin. There's absolutely no reason to be like really angry here. There is no reason. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Warhammer that does it as well. They spell orcs with a K.
Yeah,
Why?
40,000 spell orc with a K.
Why? 40,000 years from now, orcs are like, you know what? The letter C. Fuck the letter C. Right? It's a K now, and that's because it's future, right? No, it makes me so annoyed. Seriously, it's absolutely unnecessary. Just call them orcs.
I can get behind the odd letter change, perhaps changing an I to a Y or a C to a K if it's a space orc.
Ooh.
But when you're like Chip Goblin, spelling it with extra H's and apostrophes and Y's and N's, it's a bit much, really. It gets to the point where it feels forced. Like you're just trying to throw letters at a word to make it look better on the page, even though it is a goblin. And then trying to rebrand it as an original creature when it is just a thing. Not to say there's nothing wrong at all with taking something that's been done and just putting it in your world. Orcs, for example. Orcs are everywhere. You could look at handfuls of fantasy games, movies, books that have the stereotypical orc in, and you'll find it there.
Yeah, and if you don't want to make your own fantasy races, if you want to use elves, dwarves, humans, orcs, do it. Seriously, if you're going to do it, right, just run with it. The cliche thing that people talk about, don't take that to heart and think that, I need to reinvent the wheel every time I'm going to be making a new fantasy race. You don't have to do it. I mean, I I always do, right? So that sounds really hypocritical. But that's just because that I really like to work from the ground up. Every race or any world I've ever created, I always go and start with the creation story of the world. And then it gets to a point where it escalates, where it wouldn't make sense for them to be called orcs or something in my world. And I don't have any kind of, traditional fantasy races in them, just because it doesn't work out that way. But if you do, and it does work out that way, just use them. I mean, we've got what? We've got World of Warcraft, we've got the Elder Scrolls, we've got Warhammer. I mean, all these things use orcs in them, all of them, and they're all excellently successful. And there's so many different things you can put in to make them yours. And I'm not, again, we're going to talk more about that actually, because that is it's a delicate balance, changing things to make it yours. But just the next thing have on our bullet point list that we've prepared, because this is a professional podcast.
Yeah. Professional podcasters.
Strictly professional podcasters. Names that have like a million accents, or they're just completely not readable. Don't do it. Come on. I don't care if like your alien race has no lips, or like it can't say anything, so it has to hiss its words between its teeth or something. I mean, yeah, but we have to read it. Like if you're putting this in front of an audience, they have to be able to say it, and don't just put like 8 apostrophes in someone's name. I mean, I think a lot of people do it because, and I used to do it a lot, because a lot of the names in my world are based on Hawaiian names, and they do have a lot of apostrophes in the naming and the naming conventions, in Polynesian culture and Polynesian names, and I really wanted to use that, but then I thought, well, why? Because I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm basically just like ripping off something I don't understand, and then it doesn't read any better. And I was also doing it as a way to kind of break up 2 words. I mean, my main world is called Tunkalu, and it comes from the names of 2 of the creator titans, the god of earth, well, the titan of earth and the titan of life. They're called Tun and Kalu, and I thought, well, if I put an apostrophe in, that'll be like, it'll be obviously both their names. And then I thought, well, why? Because like nobody does that. Like I was talking about before, like Newcastle. It's not new apostrophe castle. It's just one word.
Well, that's an idea for a new world I might be working on. Newcastle with an extra apostrophe.
New world, Newcastle, or all the apostrophes between it.
Old world, Newcastle. No.
But think about that. If you are cramming apostrophes into everything, and you're listening to this, hear my words. No, no, but just think about it. It's quite, very niche to find a language that will do that. So consider it. Consider not using it for everything in your world.
If, for example, you had a sci-fi race where perhaps they're insectoid-based and they do indeed communicate with clicks and hisses and noises and things, and it is a discernible language, if there are some sort of humanoid race within this world that has the technology to be able to interpret this, they'd have. I feel like they have some way to be able to write that down or express it in a way that a human will be able to speak it themselves without clicking, or maybe they just use some sort of translator. But how would that come through? And obviously, how are you writing it down? Because you may have to write things down, depending on what medium you're putting this out in. Is it a book? Is it a comic? Whatever. Writing out a series of clicks and hisses is going to be tricky, in a sense that hiss, click, click, hiss. Oh yes, great.
Yeah, exactly. There is an African language that does use clicks, and if you do have clicks and stuff, you want to look it up. I think it's spelled. This might be wrong because I only know because I had a music teacher who was from Africa, and this was the language that she grew up learning, and it's spelled Xosa, and I don't know how to say that because there is a click in the word. But yeah, if that's something that you would like, then you might want to look up how their language is written. Yeah. So there's also fancy fun tips from us as well at this Worldbuilding podcast.
Bumbling tips.
Bumbling tips. Yeah, another one. Super different races. Like, I have actually seen this, and I'm genuinely not messing around, right? I've seen it where someone's like, oh, these are my elves. And they describe them, and they're like, oh, well, they're half human, half horse. You know, and they're based on Greek mythology, and they have bows and arrows, and they're really into, you know, reading the stars and making predictions on the stars. And I was like, so you mean centaurs? And they're like, well, no, they're elves. And I was like, well, they're not elves, though, are they? Like, if you put a picture of that race in front of anyone, they're going to be like, oh, cool, centaurs. Just, there's no problem with using centaurs. Centaurs are cool.
It's unnecessary rebrand. We could call that perhaps, in the sense that you're taking something, rebranding it, calling something else. It's clearly the first thing. You could just use the first thing. Use centaurs. There's nothing wrong with using a pre-existing thing.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Just going back a few steps to orcs. Lots of fantasy games, movies, they use the orc, but each one puts their own spin on it. For example, Lord of the Rings has a more brutal, nasty, slimy, vicious sort of orc. Lord of the Rings, I also just said that. World of Warcraft, the orcs there are more noble, shamanistic people. And then you have, say, for example, Elder Scrolls orcs. They're a more tribal, nomadic, sort of warrior culture style of orc, which are technically elves within the Elder Scroll, because Ozma is elf, whatever.
Yeah, they're all elves, aren't they? I mean, the Dwemer are elves as well. Dwarf elves.
Deep elves, I mean.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely.
I'll Google that.
You can nuance things and make it completely your own while still calling it an orc. I mean, the other thing, the reason people do that, still call it orc, is just so people who are reading your world can have sort of a mental connection to it. And again, like I said, I don't do that. You don't have to, but there is something to be said for just using the name of the race that everyone knows it by. If that's exactly what you're making, just make it that. Ooh, yeah. The one for me is again, we're quite fantasy in this, because there tends to be more fantasy races, I find, in fantasy rather than sci-fi. A lot of sci-fi things tend to just use humans, you know, because a lot of them are futuristic projections of the current world, right? But something I really don't like is when people have like a really sort of crazy, zany, completely new fantasy race, or not even, they don't have to be zany, but let's just say they're not humanoid at all, right? So we're like Ents or something, you know, people that are literally just trees, and then they impose like human social aspects, human socialization on them, and you think, well, why? I mean, humans have, you know, their different social cues, their different, you know, social experiences from a very, you know, because we've evolved to be people. If you're having things in your world that have evolved to be, you know, bug people, or, you know, like something like that, just consider the traits of the animal or the plant or whatever you've put in, that you mixed into them, and add that to them. And that's something I've been working with really, like, a lot recently. You know, in my world I have races that are descended from sort of certain animal or fantasy creature spirits and stuff that are in that world, and they've taken on not only some physical aspects of that, but you know, some of the social traits from it too. You know, so it's really interesting to look at, say, animals, packs, animal groups, animal hives, you know, things like that, and how they interact, and then try and put those on to, say, a humanoid or sentient, you know, a humanish race. And I'd like to see more of that. Genuinely, I'd really like to see more of that. And a really good way of sort of answering power struggles and stuff with your fantasy races is by thinking of where the resources are coming from. I made, like, on the world building subreddit, a really rough example of this. Say, like, you've got these moss monsters, right? They're like just like the bog things from WoW, you know. You know what I mean?
The mossiest.
Yeah, the mossiest of mossy things. And say let's just say the females, on their body grows the food that these fungus things eat, right? They've all got mushrooms and shit growing off them, but let's say on the males it's poisonous, on the females they grow sort of fungus fruit or some equally horrible sounding thing.
It's just not rather gnarly, but continue.
If the females were big enough to protect that fruit and then dispense it, then they would have the power, because you know, they're the ones in control of the resources. However, if the females were small and the males were able to, you know, collect the fruit in some way, then the males would probably have the power, and then they try to suppress the females in order to, you know, control the resources. And that is a really, really simplified explanation of what I'm trying to say. And I'm not going to go into it because that is it's basically a whole other podcast talking about nuances in fantasy races. But experiment is what I mean to say. Not every fantasy race is going to be humanoid. It's going to be it'll have different influences depending on how it's evolved and its place in the world and things like that. Yeah. And a good segue into that is probably going to be something that is really going to be controversial and.
We're still saying segue?
Yeah, I mean we just keep saying segue. I'm really into the word segue at the moment, as a segue into the next thing.
There's gift potential here.
There is just me repeating segue over and over and over again. Me on a segue.
Yeah.
If we ever get fans of this podcast, just gift me segueing into something.
Give this disembodied voice.
Yeah. Anyway, the thing that I'm going to talk about, right, is I'm going to get called an SJW for this. What I want to talk about is diversity in fantasy races, right? I know. And I'm going to start this topic with a pretty controversial statement, right? Not everything in fantasy is medieval England, right?
What?
And I'm guilty of this too, right? I've got maybe 2 projects that basically just feel like they're set in medieval England, and it's not, and it's lazy. It is lazy, and they're for smaller projects where I don't have to do much world building on them, and it's really easy to just be like, well, I live in England, and it's really easy to get references and resources for this. I've been studying here, England. Let's pick that, and everyone does it, and then. Either the world will have literally no diversity at all, or if there is diversity, it'll all just be in a desert city with some, online generator Arabic sounding name that probably means something ridiculous if you actually bother to translate it. And it's always a trade city, and the people there are always merchants, or they're cat people because Elder Scrolls, it's again, and then again leads you into the point of if you're going to make a fictional representation of a real human race, right? Don't just make it the stereotypes, right? If you're going to make something that's based on France, right? They don't all eat baguettes. They're not all chocolatiers. They don't all wear stripy t-shirts and have berets. If you're going to make...
Oh man, I've got so much to change.
If you're going to make something based on Native American culture, do your research. Don't just call everyone chief and stick a headdress on people. And there's things in cultures that exist for a reason. They mean different things. It's like not everyone in England. Right now, I'm sat in England and I am not wearing a bowler hat.
What's wrong with you?
I'm not.
Uncouth.
I don't have a monocle. I don't think I've ever sang God Save the Queen. I don't have the British flag dangling out of my window. Don't monoculture your people. Don't monoculture your religions as well. There's plenty of Christian style, hardcore religious people. Not every Christian person is a fanatic. They're not, of course they're not. Even Christianity itself has hundreds of different church types and denominations, and not everyone who's an atheist is super edgy. Not everyone who's a pagan is a crazy hippie that goes out hugging trees. I should know, because I am one.
A tree?
A tree, yeah.
Tree. Oh, yeah. A tree. It explains so much.
There's just avoid monocultures. Monocultures can be another topic for a different podcast, actually, because that, again, is a huge, colossal topic. But monocultures in general are a bad one. Don't do
this
it.
Sort of goes back to the fundamentals of your world, really. If it's a sort of world where people can travel freely, i.e. they can travel freely for whatever means, then culture is going to be... You're going to have cities which are melting pots. Think London. At various times, London has had various people come to it, like New York. New York today, or even when New York was founded, or various points, had a lot of cultures going to there. You know, Irish, Dutch, English, all that kind of thing. So you get a lot of cultures which are mixed together. In your world, for example, if you want to go with the trading port city is a trope, but tropes aren't bad. Just be original with them, in the sense that use them, but put your own spin on it. The trading city port, you could have a lot of cultures in there. And how do they mix together? How do two different cultures mix in the city? You might have some cultures, for example, which are far flung. No one travels to them, so they may seem completely alien to your typical medieval English city over there.
Yeah,
Things
definitely.
like that.
I mean, if you're in England, or if you know anything or have access to researching English history, London and Newcastle are both two really, really interesting trade ports to look at in terms of immigration and diversity and the kinds of people that live in them and everything like that. I spent time in both. I've lived in Newcastle for a long time as well, and the diversity is incredible, and it goes all the way into the architecture and everything. It's not just the people that are living there, and it's also shaped sort of the ethnic background of many of the people living there, and of course especially in places like England and America, where there's huge amounts of immigration from across the world, and it's added so much to those countries. And I think like Sean was saying, if you're having a trade port or a trade city, or even say if you're having like a big base, say Stormwind in World of Warcraft again, it's like the hub of the Alliance, and it's got a dwarven district in it. Because the dwarves are very much part of the Alliance. It had, until Deathwing destroyed it, it had a park which was very, very night elf, and it's got all
Been rebuilt now.
Yeah,
Well,
but it's not. It's
it's
Varian's tomb now, isn't
Yeah.
it? Spoilers.
Oh.
Which is awful and sad, so we're not going to go into that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not. We're all trying to get over that.
Yeah, I'm not going to start sobbing in the podcast. Yeah, right. And to stop us crying, I'm going to bring up the next topic. Segue. One that I actually saw mentioned by someone else. I didn't come up with this on my own, but it's a very interesting one. Something that I need to think about more as well. And that was infrastructure. The only thing that a lot of people think about is war and magic and mages and cool stuff and dragons.
They're the only things in the world, Sary.
And battle and things like that. And then you think, well, yeah, but where's all this coming from? Who's feeding your troops? Who collects the garbage? Who's who's making sure there's water supplies? And obviously, if you're writing like an epic story, don't put that in. We're talking about if you're sort of hardcore world building here, consider those things. It's not a sin to forget them if you're making like a game or a story or something, because you don't want to be playing Skyrim and then like I
Hello,
go to
I'm
the
the
trash
carpet
district every often.
We'd like to see the infrastructure of our fine city. Step this way.
Nobody wants that, people are interested in the warriors and the mages and the heroines and the heroes, and then that's what they want to play as. So obviously, not always very interesting to put in, but
It depends on what it is you're making. If you are creating a world and it has everything in this, like maybe an art book, something like that. It has all step by steps of the world. It would be perfectly fine to talk about infrastructure and things. But if you're making, say, a graphic novel about a character doing a thing, it might feel a little bit forced if a garbage man comes out and starts talking about how the waste is disposed of, unless that's a key part of the story.
yeah, but
like,
it can be a key part. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
the thing, the only time I would mention it in something, or I would sort of try to address it, not even like go into a big detail about how the ship's cleaned or something, but the only time I would address it is if say you're going on like a really long sea voyage, or really even like a really long space voyage or something like that. And the final frontier. But no, say you've got that, and like your crew are fine for years, and you've not explained at all how they're getting food, how they're getting enough vitamin D, even if they're not getting any sunlight. Like, how is that happening? How are they, getting past that? Because, we're talking about pirates and stuff. Scurvy was a real problem. because of their poor diet. And just thinking about things like that, like thinking about things other than the big conflicts and the flashy scenes, will add so much to a story. If you're even fleshing out an entire world, if you're just, trying to make that story or make that game feel really immersive, consider things like that. And I'm not, and again, right, not talking about just having like a hunger meter on your Steam Greenlight game, right? It's not the same thing, right? I mean, think about it in a place in the world, right? And how those things work, and if you've got huge battles and things, how are the countries recovering from that? I mean, you think about World War One, how it affected Western Europe. Yeah, there were empty villages. It changed the dynamics of males and females in Western Europe. Women had to do a lot of men's jobs, and it gave them more independence. Obviously it stripped a lot of returning veterans of their work, and you might want to think about things like that as well in your writing, and how the big huge events are affecting the things that go on in the story or in the game or in the graphic novel even. Yeah.
Touching on the sci-fi element you mentioned there, again this links back to rules. If you were going for a harder sci-fi thing, or even a softer sort of sci-fi where you want to have a few gritty realistic elements to it, not necessarily has to be gritty, but a few realistic tones, you probably will have to explain exactly how people are getting food on a voyage, how they're getting vitamin D, something as simple as that. But if you're going for a more softer sci-fi, say like a Star Wars, it just sort of happens. There's no point in Star Wars where someone's like, "Hey, Rebel, are you getting your vitamin D?" "Oh no, I'm not. Thanks for reminding me." But if you're going grittier, then maybe mention it. Again, it's something you want to think about. If you're doing hard sci-fi, you don't have to mention it, but you might want to think about how are these things factored into the space voyage. It might not be something you've mentioned. You may say you're doing a graphic novel, you might have a scene where the guys are gathered in the canteen, and maybe they're just complaining about the substandard rations, or about having to take their supplements that day. It's just a small little mention, but already you put so much into that world, and you explain about how ship voyages work with just a few little lines. It doesn't feel forced. It's just space sailors grumbling about, "Oh, it's lemon time again," or whatever. Something better written than that, hopefully. "Oh, lemon time." Something like that. But then you can lead that into them grumbling, and they talk about a key story point, like about the mission or whatever, and it just feels like a natural conversation. People complain. As
sure.
we're doing right now.
I haven't had nothing but Maggie bread for 3 stinking days.
Yeah, when we're gonna get some mints?
Oh, that'll happen more and more the longer we do this podcast.
Etc. Etc. Etc.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, I think that was a double-edged sword, right? If you choose to never address that, then you can't have characters mentioning it either.
Exactly.
Like, you can't have, say, you've got to pick. You're either going to put some thought into it, or you're not going to be allowed to mention it. Because, yeah, exactly like Star Wars. Nobody in those movies is like, really hungry. But, in Lord of the Rings, they address it. Because obviously, Frodo and Sam have to destroy the ring. Spoilers!
That's what it's about.
And they have to get to Mordor. And obviously, they need something to fuel them. And that's a really moving point in the film, anyway. They've got the Lembas bread from Gladriel in Lothlorien. And jokes made out of it because Pippin eats like 4. I don't know if that's just in the extended one. I haven't seen the non-extended ones for a long time because I'm not a peasant.
Extended ones are far better, everyone knows them.
Yeah. But yeah, and then Frodo is asking how much food they've got left, and then Sam's like, "Oh, we've got enough," and he's like, "Enough for what?" And he goes, "Oh, the return journey," and he's like, "Oh, I don't think there's going to be a return journey, Sam," and then your heart breaks. So yeah, I mean, I think it adds depth to think about things like that, how things are happening in your world. Okay, we've rambled on about that for a long time.
Yeah.
So I want to mention creatures. That's a bugbear of mine, right? And this I seem to be the only person who gets super infuriated by this. Right, you've put I see these worlds, and they've got so much effort put into the fantasy races and even the biomes and the environments. It's incredible, and they've got like castles that are situated on top of waterfalls, and you've got like ice rivers and lava people and all these really cool ideas. And then every single creature in it could be found in a medieval village. It's like I've got horse, pigs, cows, sheep, and a dragon, and that's it. Don't do that. Don't have these fantastical, incredible worlds and races and places, and then tell me that the only mount there is in the world is a horse. Are you telling me that all these amazing things have evolved in your magic-fueled, or even like tech-fueled, sci-fi-fueled world, and the only thing that you've got to ride is a horse? It bugs me so much. And it's in games. It's not in WoW, actually. It's in the Elder Scrolls. Well, I mean, it isn't, but it's in Skyrim, isn't it? The only thing you can get a hold of is a horse. And they explain it away like, oh, well, Skyrim's horses are really hardy and good for climbing mountains. And they're not, because they just fall through them, because it's buggy. It's still amazing. But, yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I would just like to see more stuff. I mean, I know that if you're going for sort of realistic fantasy, it's really easy to just want everyone to be on horses, because that is what we associate with realism. But I'd like to see more.
Realistically, though, if you have a race of lizard men, why is it so far-fetched to have some fantasy-based creatures? You have you have a race of people who are some sort of insectoid being in a fantasy or a sci-fi setting. It isn't far-fetched to have some sort of weird pig creature.
Weird pig creature.
But again, that's the sort of thing. It was a brainstorm quick. Weird pig creature. Oh, I've created a monster. If these things do exist, and they may have some effect on the world. For example, let's say it's some sort of creature that has a tough hide. People might hunt that and use that in their buildings or in their clothing.
Yeah, definitely.
As in like leather, that's the skin of an animal. So if you have a creature that has a tough like hide or big scales, and they might factor into building materials, clothing materials, the culture of the race, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like the mammoth seriously affected the early human and the Neanderthal. They made everything out of bits of mammoth. I was reading something the other day that they would make needle and thread, out of mammoth bone and mammoth sinew. Used every part of it, and they would make, tents out of the tusks and things like that. You could, if you are creating creatures, the amount of extra stuff you have to work with in terms of material and even culture. I mean, mammoth hunts were a big part of, say, like, early human culture. The things you could do. Don't ignore the creatures and even the plants and stuff that you could make. Don't ignore that. You can get so much into your story, so much depth, so much detail. So I suppose it's not really a pet hate. It's just something I'd really like to see more of in all kinds of things, because I really love it. In games where you can like collect things and make stuff out of them and stuff like that. It's really fun, really fun. Yeah. Oh, there's one last. No, there's not. There's two. Second to last thing is I actually saw this mentioned on the Worldbuilding subreddit the other day, and it's something that I haven't seen much in my work, and it's where everything happens really logically. Say, like, I don't know, General X has the biggest army, so General X wins, right? And there's no space for any kind of twists and turns in your story. There's no space for any kind of underdog story, or say a hero, or even for sort of weather or something to make an impact on the outcome of a war or the outcome of your story. And it doesn't work like that. History really doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like this has the biggest army, so this wins. I mean, if you want a really good example, you can watch the film Red Cliff, which is really good drama. Have you still not seen it? I keep nagging you to watch that because it's so good. And it's an incredible movie adaptation of a Chinese history, and it's not. I mean, it's not really a spoiler. 'Cause you can sort of guess that the underdog is going to win. That's kind of the story of the film, right? And they win. They're up against huge odds, and they win. And it's all down to sort of extremely careful tactics. I was actually suggested by a fellow world builder to read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, to consider sort of epic battles. And again, not expecting you to be a master general to be able to write a kind of good sci-fi or fantasy battle.
A great scholar.
Yeah, exactly. But just doing a little bit of research. I mean, if world building is one of your interests, then this should be fun for you, right? You want to know about things like this, you know. And then also, there isn't good and bad guys in history. There isn't. If they're going to war, they're killing people, right? Not every soldier who's on the side you don't like is a bad guy. And I mean, Nazis are overused. Really overused. And it's even overused for me to bring them up. But if you think that every single German soldier was a bad guy, you're wrong. Completely wrong. And, you know, the wars and things, that a lot of times they're extremely one-sided. And I think Harry Potter is probably my least favourite popular example when it comes to this. Well, my most favourite to drag up, but one that really bothers me. I mean, everyone who follows Voldemort is just a dick. Apart from, like, Draco Malfoy, who's sort of pushed into it by his parents.
He's a bit of a dick.
Yeah, but I mean, he's, you know... But, yeah, I don't like how the characters basically just do a complete 180. So many of them do. And, you know, they're just sort of alright with him doing all these horrific things, and they're all just really mean, and there's no nuance to Voldemort even. He was never good. He was just born horrible. He's always going to be horrible. And, well, obviously I love Harry Potter, you know, but you've got to pick apart what you love, or, you know, you don't. But I suppose, you know, and the thing that really bothered me is that she can write really good... you know, sort of grey characters. I mean, Snape is an excellent example of that. You know, he does some very, you know, evil things or very nasty things, but he's not a bad person at all. And he's very interestingly revealed. And Dumbledore as well is kind of sort of the opposite to that. You know, he's not as great as everyone thinks he is. And that's very interesting, and
yeah.
I wish that we'd had some of that in Voldemort. You know, we started to get Voldemort's story revealed. I was really excited when I was reading those books to find something out about him that wasn't just he was born an evil child and he is evil. But that is all there is to him.
Similarly, characters who are pure light-bringing good characters without any flaws, anything that makes him human. They might not be human, but anything that makes them relatable. You know, they're just a shining good guy. It feels boring to me. Of course, have your shining knight paladin, but you know, he might have flaws or a past. You know, some sort of checkered past. Why have you become a paladin? And that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's the same for heroes and villains for sure.
I had an interesting point about just going back slightly about the army thing. If you'd like to indulge me.
Yeah, of course.
Personalities. An army isn't faceless. So let's say you have a fantasy army. There's a general at the top. He's going to have a personality. So he might be arrogant or ruthless. He might think everything through. Again, with the soldiers, they might not necessarily blindly follow someone into battle. Oh, that's a terrible plan. Someone will march into it. And a typical fantasy battle, i.e., one army meets in a field, the other army on the other side, and they march into the center and kill each other, is relatively rare in history. Purely because when you throw your army at another army, you're going to take a lot of losses. Even if you win, you might win massively. There is a chance you lose a hefty chunk. There are far more sieges in history than there are battles, purely because it's easier just to wait outside a castle and wait for the guys to maybe surrender. Assaults on a castle are obviously going to be bloody and horrible, but as in a typical siege of waiting for them to starve or surrender is relatively, if you can keep supplies coming in, it's going to be relatively okay. So just think about major battles within your world. Think about why they happened. They might have happened for various reasons: cultural, economic, geographical reasons. Let's say a Party A wanted the land that Party B has. Why would they fight? Why wouldn't they just talk it out? That says something about the culture of the people and also the personalities of the people, and that's going to affect the world and world building.
Say it like a spooky monster.
World building. And also sci-fi wise, this is something that I thought about quite a lot. Is the space battle, the fleet on fleet space battle. It's in some ways similar to a naval like fleet on fleet ship battle, which in history, or at least modern, as in guns, is very rare. There's been maybe a handful. In the past, in the ancient world, fleet battles were complete massacres. Think Greeks versus Persians.
Greek fire.
Yeah, were complete massacres. The losing side rarely had survivors. And if you think of the logistics of a space battle, it's space. Okay, so this again relates to rules. How based on realism is your world of sci-fi? If it's a very realistic world, it's space. You can see forever. So you're going to see them coming unless they have some technology that hides that. You might explain that technology. You might just say it's stealth or whatever, or they're so fast that they just get there and they have a battle. But say, for example, you have two sides that want to fight each other. It's space. There is nothing to hide behind. So thinking about it like that way, it's going to be a pretty grisly affair if two fleets show up in space and just shoot at each other. Because where do you run to? You just run in a straight line, but they can always see you.
Yeah.
So unless you run to the point where you can hide behind the sun, in which case you'll be fighting at the sun. So that has its own problems. So you don't need to be a master of space and science to understand it, but just think about how it relates in your world. What sort of sci-fi is it? That's going to affect it.
Yeah. For real, really, really good points brought up there. There's so many just explosive battles and things in fantasy and sci-fi that just seem to have literally no consequences at all. It's even a thing in Game of Thrones. I mean, yes, there is a lot of things. Well, I mean, more the series than the books. The TV series. And I think the only time they really, really made it feel like a real battle was happening was in the last season. So just cover your ears if you haven't seen it yet. But with
I'm wearing headphones.
When Ramsay dies, and then the battle between the Boltons and then Jon and then the Starks, it's really dark and gritty, and it fits so well with the theme of it and the amount of people that die, and that's what it would really be like, though. Like as Sean was saying, sort of meeting on a battlefield is horrific. The death is incalculable. It's awful. It's a massacre, and I think we need to consider that, because we have so many of these things. Just loads of people come and then they fight, and then I won. Even if you win, you'll have lost friends. And I mean, we won. The First World War, and the colossal impact that it had on Britain, even just a win, was horrific. So yeah, the impact of war is important.
In terms of a commitment, putting all of your soldiers on a field to fight the other guy's soldiers, both of you are committing to that. It takes both of you to do it. So for that to happen, both sides must believe they have a reasonable chance of winning based on some tactic or some strategy, whatever it may be. Both of them would believe they have a chance. If they didn't think they have a chance of winning, they wouldn't be there, because if they were to lose, they would lose everything they had, all their power. They'd have to go back to political maneuvering alone without an army.
Yeah, exactly. To be screwed.
And within that Game of Thrones example, at the end of it, Jon Snow's army is lying bloody and dead on the field. For the most part, he lost everything he had to win. Obviously, his allies rolled at the end. So again, just bring that back to the whole world building thing. The history of your world may have had some of these large grisly battles. How does that affect the world? what how did the build-up affect the world? How did the aftermath affect the world? Again, this might just be something that you consider personally, as in the build-up to the current setting, or it might be something that characters talk about. If it's a graphic novel, there might be scars on the world left from it, or monuments, or maybe it's something to speak about. Maybe there's a national holiday for this thing, and that's maybe a scene within, say it's a comic, say a scene within that is set within the celebrations of a Memorial Day or something, and then characters may mention it and then talk about the main story and how does that relate and how does it tie in. Pointing to my bow with string going all over it in a wild way. How does it tie in? Perfect Silver.
Yeah. Okay, so our last point that we want to talk about, we're going to have questions and things at the end, because we've actually got loads of questions, which is really crazy, considering we are two almost nobodies.
It's even less than a nobody.
Yeah, we're like an essence, a void.
An idea of a person.
Yeah, I'm a figment. But yeah, the last thing is...
Or a pigment.
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 Yeah, the logic of your world is not realism, okay? And I see a lot, again, on the world building subreddit, I see a lot of people complaining that, their world doesn't have to be realistic. And of course it doesn't. No, of course it doesn't have to be realistic at all. There's plenty of things that aren't realistic. I mean, you can't have, dragons flying about with our atmosphere. So if somebody says that to you, tell them to shut up. I mean, like, if anyone's genuinely saying that to you, like, you've got a dragon and like, oh, but with this atmosphere, that dragon wouldn't be able to fly. Like, right, whatever. Realism is not fun. All the stuff we've been talking about, we've obviously dragged up loads of real-world examples, but we mean to bring them up in a way to use them as inspiration, right? Like a building block, like I was talking about before, with the anatomy thing. If you're an artist, you have to learn proper human anatomy before you can make, anime or elves or something where you're changing the anatomy. You have to learn the anatomy of a horse if you're going to make sort of weird Pegasus unicorn things. You have to. And it's a building block, but you don't have to stick to it religiously. Anyone who says you do is just boring. Which has probably just offended loads of listeners. Sorry, you're not boring. But once you make rules for your world, you have to stick to them. And I don't mean that to sort of say, oh, I am the god of all world building, do what I say. But if you're going to make rules in your world and then not stick to the rules that you've set, it's just going to become a mess. Like, it's going to get so boring. And so, changing things, like, doing a complete 180 on stuff that you've done doesn't make something exciting and predictable. It just makes the reader annoyed, because you're like, well, what the hell? Like, that wasn't possible, say, like, 2-3 books ago. Well, what's this? It just feels lazy, like you couldn't be bothered to, like, find an actual workaround, so suddenly everything's different, like...
Yeah.
And, again, sorry, Harry Potter fans, but this really bugged me in Harry Potter, because... it's actually harder, right, to unlock a pissing door or lift a feather than it is to kill somebody, right? Because all you do to kill someone is you point your wand at them and then say the killing curse, right? To do Wingardium Leviosa, you have to say it right? And you have to do your wand in like a special flicky twist thing that only Hermione could do. So why is it easier to kill someone than to do that? Like, what is that magic system? It's so messed up. And like,
maybe it's the moral challenge is harder to take a life or something as pretentious as that.
But they don't mention that, and then they easily could, because there's a lot of emotional magic and stuff in, saying, casting a Patronus, right? That takes a lot of your emotion, and you have to, think of a happy or strong memory in order to be able to do it. But not to kill anyone, right? That's fine. I mean,
what am I irked with the Harry Potter spell? Just going off a tangent. But maybe I don't fully understand it. But the killing curse, it kills them. They're just dead. I don't know. Maybe there's more. Maybe there's something to the soul. Maybe that's why it's so evil. But you have spells that could blow chunks out of rock, and Septum Sempra, it basically can cut them to bits. That's a fun. That's forgivable. That's a unforgiving curse. But you could blow someone into fleshy pulp, right? With say like a Bombardo spell or whatever. Theoretically, I mean, I don't know the rules of the spell. Maybe it only works on rock. But that's fine. But using just straight up killing them, that's straight to Azkaban with you, sir.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a bit in the last book, in the first part, or in the first part of the movie, if you've only seen the movies, in the first half of the two movies, for some reason they made two of. Yeah, there's a bit where Harry is fighting, the Death Eaters and Voldemort that are chasing them on broomsticks when they're getting him from the Dursleys' house, and he doesn't, what's it called, the paralyzing one, Petrificus Totalis, or Expelliarmus, or whatever. He doesn't stun somebody on a broom because he doesn't want to kill them. However, if he had stunned them, that would have been fine, because he's just stunning them, he's not killing them. But because they're on a broom, sort of 60 feet up or something, they would definitely die when they hit the ground. But that's alright. You can do that, and the Ministry won't notice, but you can't just kill someone. You can slice up a fellow student at Hogwarts, and nothing happens. I mean, he nearly kills Malfoy. He, really slices him up. Slashes him all over his body, and it's like, ooh, but I'm Harry Potter and I felt bad. It's like, right? Also, the fact that you can invent your own spells? When does that come into it? He's like, oh, I made up this evil spell. So, can anyone do that then? If they put enough work in, can anyone invent any spell? Because that's a really big game changer as well, isn't it?
That's an interesting point. Before Snape invented that spell, if someone said those words, would it have done the same thing?
I don't know. I've no idea, because the magic system is so badly explained in it. I mean, again, love them, part of my childhood, adore the movies, adore the books, but there's so many big holes in them. Why don't James and Lily just apparate when Voldemort knocks on their door? They're adults. And you could hold on to a child, or because, Dumbledore does it to Harry a lot. You can side along apparate. Why don't they just apparate? Oh, Voldemort's here. Better go, because, he's here to kill us.
In case you're just tuning in, you're listening to Harry Potter Failings.
But they are world-building sins, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, well, just to be more general then, the last thing we have is when you have no logic in your world, so characters and stuff, like we were just talking with Snape's spell, Sectum Sempra, they can just do whatever. And that, again, is boring. If your character is all-powerful, or,
Mary Sue.
Yeah, if you've got a Mary Sue in there, it's not good. It's not good to have so few rules that literally anything can happen at any point, and that's fine, because you didn't put the rules in.
Similarly,
Similarly.
Similarly. If you have a Mary Sue, as in a character that can do everything, is the best at whatever. A Mary Sue civilization, some sort of civilization that is a shining utopia, is amazing at everything, isn't particularly interesting without flaws. Again, the whole Mary Sue civilization wouldn't really fit within a world to a level that would make that world interesting. You have the civilization that can just fix everything, and well, great. Well, okay, what strife or problems are there for the characters to deal with? Which is again, I'm not a writer, but to me, for a story always has a main problem. Frodo has to destroy the ring. Harry has to fight Voldemort. Within a World of Warcraft story, there's a big bad boss has turned up, and he's destroying the countryside, and there's a garrison you need to run. Things like that. If you have a Mary Sue culture, then they wouldn't have any problem within that culture if they can do everything amazingly. Unless of course, you spin it in a way that within this culture, everyone is good at everything, to the point where everyone is so jealous of everyone else being good at things that they too have to be good at everything. And that could then lead to something. See, we're world building here, folks.
Yeah, live world building. Live. Doing it live.
World building.
No.
Things like that.
Yeah,
think about
sure.
it.
There's loads of interesting things you can do. Basically, everything that we've talked about, because we're done with the main meat of the show. show and the podcast. I'm in sort of weird Broadway 20s style. That's all, folks.
You'll do far, kid.
Um,
To go far, I mean. I didn't say that.
sound like a rabbit person. Anyway, right. God. Oh, it's a mess. It's falling apart. I can't remember what I was going to say now. But yeah, no, there we go. Basically, all we're really saying is just do a tiny bit of research in which to build from. And just think about everything that you're putting in. Think about how it affects other things. Everything in the world is linked. And again, not a pagan hippie, but it's true. You know, there's plenty of you know, what are they called? I've forgotten the word for it, but you know, kind of an animal chain, right? So this eats that, and that eats that, and that eats
Food
that.
chain.
Yeah, food chain, that's it. If you remove one, the whole thing is ruined. And if you don't plan things like that in your world, people viewing it and people reading it are going to notice because we're hardwired that way to make connections to things, you know? And it's very easy when you're the creator to forget those things. I'm talking about the frailty of the human mind. Before we get into questions, at the end of every podcast, if we rant about something or complain about something, to level the playing field, we are also going to talk about the times we have been guilty of the same thing, just to prove that we're not making this to pick on you, it's just to generate discussion. So, do you want to go first with your world building sins, or do you want me to take the wheel?
You take the wheel.
Right, I've touched on mine already, and mine is that I completely reinvent the wheel. I make my own thing for so many things that I just really don't need to. Like, there's actually a question about this later, so I'll talk about it more then. But I even made my own calendar system for my new world for no reason. You know, I made new dates, new days, new month names, new week names, new everything. And with races, I build everything from the ground up, and I overwork far too many things. Like, things that I don't really need that much world building for. Like, I'm working on a manga as well. I've world built that. And I've made maps. I mean, the map's cool because it's like a little town map and it's very cute and Harvest Moony, so that was fun. But so much stuff that I don't really need to do, but I do it anyway because well, I mean, I say I don't really need to do it, but I just find it easier to write from a setting that's completely built, right? I mean, it takes much longer, but I really hate to come across things when I'm in, like, the flow of writing or the flow of drawing or the flow of, you know, making a game or something like that. Yeah, actually, we probably should have introduced that at the beginning. You do your world-building sins, and then we'll talk about what we actually make and what we do, because that was shit that we forgot to do that at the beginning.
We'll loop
We'll
back.
work it, yeah.
One of my in college, I worked on a. It was like a sci-fi, like comic for a project. Basically, I wanted it to be a gritty dystopian sci-fi, not quite dystopian but gritty. So the city was essentially filled with slums, but it was just okay. So it's a gritty sci-fi. It's a city. Oh, there are slums, but I hadn't thought why there are slums. Why they're there? What's the score? Like, why has the city become slummed?
Can
I
I
hadn't got
ask
into it.
if the slums were, like, near the bottom of the city or near
Oh,
the
yeah.
river? Or...
Yeah.
Oh,
they
were
were.
they?
Yeah. Which in itself isn't bad, but I hadn't given it any thought as to why.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it's not a bad thing to have that in, but if it's just because you've just put it there and there's no connection at all between that and the rest of the story, then
it didn't have any bearing other than to make it sort of super gritty because slums and you have nasty people.
yeah.
Whereas now thinking about it, the city perhaps could have been, or at least in a new take on it, on that idea, which has evolved quite a bit since way back then.
Because we're old now.
Yeah, because we're old now. The city was attacked during a war to the point where this area became destroyed and rebuilt, but was rebuilt in such a way that was lacking facilities for some time. So then it has to, rely on its own steam in such a way.
Yeah, so they've had to rebuild it out of whatever they can, and the facilities are
Yeah.
what is available to them, kind of thing. So it makes sense for it to be, a bit of a shell.
Yeah, and the war may have ended, but this place has remained in that way.
Ooh, looping back to how the
Yeah.
wars affect your society, and and then exactly.
Things like that.
Cool.
Like if it's like a galactic-wide sci-fi war, there are going to be there's a lot of little people it's going to affect. Like your massive fleet that was constructed, where was that constructed from? Like where was the iron? Assuming there are metal ships, where was the iron mined? Was it from asteroids? It was from the surface of a planet. It's going to be pretty extensive strip mining if you're going to be building a fleet out of it, which is going to affect things. So something to consider.
And the cost, I mean, how much it takes to build sort of like a rocket is colossal. The cost of building a fleet, I mean, obviously you could, argue away a lot of it with, well, obviously we've got better technology now because it's the future. But it's not a cheap thing to build anything. It's not a cheap thing to build, say, even a boat. It's expensive. So yeah.
It depends on the size of your world. If it's like, say if it's our system, you got like a sun and like some planets. Fleets are probably going to be smaller based on the fact that there isn't a lot of facility to make them. But if it's a galactic-wide world, then you could say like, oh yeah, they've come from across the galaxy at this one place, so you can sort of fluff over it with size. The smaller it is, the smaller the world is, the more you have to think about these things. If it's big, then you can say, oh, whatever.
Yeah,
think
I
about
got it from the asteroid. Think about it.
Yeah.
So before we get into questions, actually, we can just get straight into the questions because one of the questions is, who are you guys and what on earth are you working on that gives you any right to tell us how to build our world?
Is that an actual question?
No, I added to a bit. The question was
Oh.
just, so what projects are you guys working on? But I thought I'd make it meaner and more
Yeah,
dynamic for the edginess of the podcast. I'll go first again. Worldbuilding is kind of my job. Right, go way back when. So both of us went to university to study game art, and we're both artists, and we went to the same university, and we've been friends for a very long time now. And we frequently talk about the worlds that we're building, which is why we made this podcast, because we talk about it a lot, and we kind of figured the things that we talk about, they might be useful to other people, they might be entertaining, and if you want to listen to it for free while you're building your world or whatever, because it is free, we're not going to charge for it, we're not monsters.
Although,
Well, we're not monsters inside. We might look like monsters, but we're good inside. Like from where the wild things are. That's what we look like. Exactly like that. I'm the white one with the funky teeth. But yeah. So I currently am working on. I think I sent you a list of them the other day, Sean. It's about 13 different worlds.
oh yeah, that thing.
And they're all for a colossal document, like a tome. Like I mailed you it and sent it by like Eagle or something.
Eagle didn't make it.
No, it didn't. But the tome got there. It got there. With the name of the wind. But yeah, I work on about 13 different things. The styles I work on, well, the projects I work on, they're all for different things. There's one that's just kind of my main world that's just become this like colossal obsession, and eventually I'd love for it to be the basis of all sorts of things. I mean, this is like my dream tier. This isn't what I do for a job, but it is a dream. I'd love to write, epic novels in it. I'd love to create art series from it. I'd love people to make movies of it, because then I'd get to because I have all these like little soundtracks in my head, songs that would be really cool and different scenes, and I think, oh man, someone
Actors
really needs
that
to
play roles.
yeah, for real, seriously. And like, oh, do you know who'd be really good at this? Do you know who'd be really good at that? I really want them in it, and yeah, and I'd really love more to come of that. But that one I build just because I want it to be done. I don't get paid to make that one, but a lot of my income comes from people seeing my artwork and then commissioning me for different things. So I suppose all the work I do helps into getting more work. I also build worlds for kind of projects for other people. Work as a freelance artist, work as a freelance writer. I'm constantly working because basically what's happened is my hobby and my job have become the same thing. So I have no free time anymore. I just sort of get up and I work on this, and then I sleep, and then I get up, and I don't have weekends either. I just work every day. Doing the thing I love though. it's a lot of work. I would say that if you want to do, because I mentioned that world building is my job on the Reddit, and a lot of people seem like really interested in it. And I would say that if you don't really love this, like if you're not prepared to actually work kind of 70-hour weeks with no days off, don't do it. It's a lot more work. It would have been so much easier for me to just apply to a games company, or apply to just even get a job in a store, just anything to get money. It would have been so much easier than this. And I wake up with regrets. No, but I do what I love. So yeah, I make things for mangas, for games, for books, for graphic novels, for anything you can think of that needs art. Or I'm thinking of branching into audio soon, actually, but I'll leave that a separate topic. But yeah, what do you do, Sean?
Well, you're going to make my life seem very mediocre and small now.
Not really. I work at home.
I have a job.
I meant, what are you doing for world building? Not like tell us your life story.
Well, I get up around 6:20. World building. I'm mainly focused on the sci-fi. I have a long-running project. That it's a working title, but so I won't go into the title. But it's something I did throughout college. Well, towards the end of college, throughout university, as my final year project. And then I've just continued it, really. It's the sort of thing that has grown, and has grown me. Looking back at its beginnings and looking to where it was a year ago and where it is a month ago, where it is now, it's come so far. And
I love it.
Being able to grow my skills outside of it, and able to put them back into it. Even like writing. I'm not a writer. I've never done writing. Some of the storylines I had at the start compared to them some I had a year ago, and now you see the growth. And it's a sci-fi thing, like I said. It's something I'm really into, sci-fi. Your classic sci-fi, your Alien, your Blade Runner, your iconic sci-fis. It's big influences. But again, I'm trying to put my own spin on it. So it's sci-fi with elements of your classic, like Master and Commander and Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of like 18th century Ship of the Line stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
A very gritty sci-fi twist on it.
I mean, I've been there since the birth of it, and it's grown so much. It's so deep and interesting now, and there's just like bits of history to it and everything. And for the next time,
I'm gonna take that bit and just have it on a little. I can press the button. Oh, it's so deep and rich, and it's amazing.
For the next time, I'll see if I'll sort out my portfolio and my work so you can see some of the crap we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. The links prepared. Oh well.
Yeah, we should have. Yeah. Next time we'll try and get links for our work. I post on the World Building subreddit a lot, so if you're on there, my username is wolfu-art. I post a lot of Titans, so if you've seen them, that's me.
When you say links, do you mean the animal links, or do you mean like? Because I like links.
Like the animals, we're going to send them to all the listeners of this. Free links.
Links is for all. What's the plural of links? I don't know.
Link. I think it's just links.
No.
But yeah, we'll try to get some actual links and stuff that I can put in the description or whatever of this podcast for you to look at as well, to sort of supplement what we're talking about. But for now, you're just going to have to take it on good faith that we do these things and we aren't just liars. But are you ready for questions then?
We've got always ready.
I will warn the listeners in advance. Sean hasn't seen any of these questions. I got an overwhelming amount of them. I'm really shocked that this many people want to support us doing this. Cause,
as Ilden would say, I'm not ready.
Yeah. Right.
Says, right.
There's no really grim ones. There's some fun ones, some weird ones. I'll just read them. They're all in a random order. Some of them are to do with fantasy and world building. Some of them are just mental. Like the first one, if you could be a crayon, what colour would you be?
I'd be what colour? What crayon? I think I'd like to be either a purple or a grey.
A grey.
Yeah.
I'd like to be that kind of light aqua blue. It's my favourite colour.
I think I'd like to be a purple crayon. It gets some use here and there, But it's one you save. The purple crayons are the good crayons.
Mine's like the crayon that'll be ground into the dirt when someone's painting the sea, or like drawing that in, just smashed up. That's how I feel, overworked and smashed
Or
up.
if it was a grey crayon, it'd be fine until someone had to do like a D&D map of a cave. No!
Your head ground into the floor. Next one. What do you use for inspiration? Just a deep question.
Oh,
By the way, I didn't ask any of these people if they were alright with me saying who it was that asked. So it just looks like we're liars that have come up with a load of questions. But next week I will ask people if I'm alright to say if they've asked. But yes, sorry, continue.
This is from Stephen Redcar. Inspiration for me is for lots of sources, really. Just linking it to the sci-fi thing rather than generally. A lot of the classic sci-fi movies. So you think again, your Aliens, again, repeat myself later. Obviously, my particular world. Eventually, I wanted to be a graphic novel / comic. So, of course, a lot of my inspiration comes from comics and graphic novels. Things like there's a lot of really good sci-fi comics from Dark Horse, Aliens once again. It's something I'm really into. Recently, I've been reading a lot of the Saga graphic novels for story and also world building. They're really super interesting. That's by who's the artist? Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan. If you're interested, they wrote Saga. Again, it's something that. It's a really interesting world. It's quite wacky and zany, and it's got some certainly some adult themes to it. But it's really well put together. It's interesting.
Cool.
It's a new take. It's something that I like to look at things like that, sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I get a lot of it from nature and natural history because I'm really, really interested in things like dinosaurs and evolution and sort of nature and seasons and the way the world changes and things like that. So natural things is where I get most of my inspiration from. But obviously, I'm a huge fantasy fan. I love Terry Pratchett. I love Tolkien. I'm rereading Patrick Rothfuss. The Name of the Wind, King Killer Chronicle. They're really good. Obviously, everything I'm mentioning is awesome, and you should go read it. And a lot of kind of older cartoons that people think are creepy, like The Last Unicorn. I love that. I love Watership Down.
Wine.
Wine. But yeah, that's from The Last Unicorn. We're not just sort of going mental if you haven't seen it. Old cartoons as well, yeah. Things like Neverending Story and yeah, and The Animals of Farthing Wood and Redwall and all kinds of things. I read a lot. And I get less inspiration than you'd think from games. The only ones I found particularly inspiring is Ori and the Blind Forest, which Sean actually bought me. I found that really, really inspiring and really motivating. And for art, I've got the Blizzard art book, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love looking at it. It's incredible. It always gives me something to aspire to.
I remembered more inspiration, by the way. If you want to tag me back in.
Yeah, it's alright. We've got about 30 questions, though, so
yeah,
we're going to have to be a bit briefer with our answers.
Well, I have a book and also a game.
Okay.
Book series, The Expanse series. I forget the author, but super good sci-fi. It's harder sci-fi, but has some typical sci-fi elements to it, and it's a really good read. The characters are really good, settings, and then games. The StarCraft is one of the games I grew up on.
Yeah.
Playing with my granddad. He's still alive, so don't feel sad. And the technology within StarCraft has been quite a hefty influence on my own project. Just the way it's clunky and gritty and oily, and it obviously it's vastly over-engineered, but within the world it looks like it can function. But yes, and tag back out.
Yeah, definitely. And then the childhood thing, Tolkien. My dad's a huge Tolkien fan. And that was a huge part of my childhood as well. It was The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and it sort of kicked this all off, I think. Yeah, anyway, if you could be a Disney villain, who would you be? I'd be Gaston. Gaston, hands down. No one.
Sorcery or witchcraft, whatever.
No, that's Frollo.
Oh, I always get mixed up.
Yeah, I want to be Gaston. The guy from Beauty and the Beast who's just like a muscle-bound moron. Because at least I'd be like hot and not disgusting, and I know he's a bit of a dick. I don't know, but I'd probably be Gaston because I get the best song. And the rest are just sort of really evil, like really evil. I don't wanna be-
Scar managed to get together the hyenas.
Be
Granted, there was a lot
prepared.
of Nazi ideology there, but you know,
Yeah, it was goose stepping and
yeah.
yeah,
Could we say Emperor Palpatine? He's Disney now.
sure. Ooh, I might be
Good.
Barbosa, but he's not really a villain. But I love Jeffrey Rush.
Oh
Actually,
yeah,
we got a
he was the
question.
villain first.
Who our favourite actors or actresses are, and I have 3, and I don't care about any others. Really don't care. But well, no, like you go first. You go first because mine are probably going to be way more
Mine varies like the weather.
changeable.
I think probably currently I'm really into this voice actor called Matthew Mercer, who he's one of my favourites currently. You might know him from such voices as McCree in Overwatch. He does a ton of Blizzard stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I know.
Rex,
I think I know.
Rexar. He's Gangplank in League of Legends. He's the DM of Critical Role. I mentioned that right at the start. And voice actors are actors. All the guys in that, they're
Of
super
course,
cool.
they're actors. People who say they
Yeah.
are, they give so much life to games and animated films and everything. Yeah.
Like within Critical Role, probably 80% of them have done a voice in World of Warcraft.
Oh wow.
So it's like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, wow. So that's super cool. And in terms of like screen actors,
You say Sean Bean.
I was gonna say Sean Bean. Oh,
I know you
he's
too
cool.
well.
Yeah, you know me too well.
You know who I'm going to say then, if you know me very
Probably.
well. I'm going to say first person actually is Jeffrey Rush. I love everything that he does. Captain Barbosa, incredible. In The King's Speech, he's amazing. In The Book Thief, which has both of my favourite actors in it. My
And
mic
Fraser?
is going to have popped horribly when I said that. One of my other favourite actors is, and everyone laughs at me because I do think he's absolutely gorgeous. And the only actor I have like a proper crush on as well is Ben Schnetzer, who played Khadgar in
No, of course.
the WoW
Should've seen this
movie,
coming.
and he plays Max in The Book Thief. And if you've seen him in the WoW movie, you should watch The Book Thief. Obviously, he's great as Khadgar in the WoW movie, but it's very funny and quite light-hearted for how, you know, fantasy it is. But The Book Thief is a completely different kind of film. It's extremely sad. It's about it's not about Nazi Germany. A lot of people think it is. It's about the effect Nazi Germany had on the people living in Germany, and there's no war or anything in it. It's a very focuses around a child, a girl. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's very sad, and the acting in it is. I was absolutely blown away by it. I had to watch it like the day after I saw it. I had to watch it twice in a row. It was so good. And the other guy, I don't know if he's a favourite actor, but I'm getting kind of fond of the stuff he's in, and it's Benedict Cumberbatch. Like, I didn't think that because the first time I heard of him was people talking about how hot he was, and I don't get that. Sorry, Benedict,
No.
you're lovely, but I don't get it.
But Benedict's a regular listener of our
Might
first.
be, if he ever hears this. But his acting as Smaug was crazy good. The voice acting. And he looks great in Doctor Strange. I loved Sherlock. He was really good in the Star Trek movie. You know, the newer one. It's not the newest.
yeah.
It's Into Darkness.
Into
I
Darkness.
don't know if they've got a new one now.
Yeah, that character is super good.
Yeah.
Love that character.
He's really, really good. Amazing actor. So they're the only 3 that I follow with any. I mean, obviously there's ones that you think are attractive. Like, obviously everyone finds Orlando Bloom attractive. Duh. You know, but he's an alright actor, but I've never sort of been really moved by anything he's been in. I'm being really offensive now. I don't mean it in a bad way, just everyone's got their favourites. Right, okay. Would you rather fight 1 horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
I'd go for the single duck-sized, horse-sized duck.
Yeah,
Think
same.
about it this way: if there are
Kick it in the
100,
throat.
if there are 100 horse-sized duck-sized horses, then they're gonna swarm you. They're gonna be all over you. It's over. But if it's just one, you can circle around, get a bit of the Star Trek theme going.
Yeah, do we get weapons?
I'm
'Cause
I'm assuming we're getting
I'd
weapons.
behead a duck if it was trying to kill me, even if it was a giant rare duck.
I think we get something like a stick, maybe. Dun dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun.
We've got what's your favourite bird?
Bird.
Such a pure, gentle question for this podcast.
I'm gonna be edgy and say a raven purely because it ties in with my fantasy thing, which not fantasy thing, sci-fi thing. Oh, it's sci-fi.
Oh, you done? Don't know if I have a favourite bird. I like all birds.
I like the ones you could birds of prey. You could set on a unruly peasant.
Yeah. I quite like. Actually, no, I lied. Owls. Any kind of owl is my favourite. Love owls. I like drawing them. I like painting them. I think they're really fascinating. I love their big eyes and the way they hoot. They're great. Owls. Definitely owls. Ooh, okay. Let me have a look. I'm gonna have to. Oh no, I'm so unprofessional. I have to like find the questions on Facebook. I'm gonna do it on my phone because I've closed Facebook because I think the notifications are getting recorded. Okay.
I can find the thing.
Would you? Oh, I've got it up. Would you rather have the head the size of a beach ball or a head the size of a pea?
Well, that's.
I'd say beach ball because
Well, it was a
that's
pea.
less
People think
different.
you had no head.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't eat if you had a pea head. I mean, if I had a beach ball head, I'd look like a freak, but I'd be able to live, right?
Okay, yeah, I could just smash it off a sharp rock if I got sick of it. But a pea-sized head.
Yeah.
Suppose you could just get like some clamps and just straight away, but you know.
That's... Yeah.
Straight away, I thought there's 2 ways to murder myself.
Exactly.
If-
It wasn't like, if you had a beach ball head, how would you commit suicide? That wasn't the question, but now the listeners are informed. You're stuck in the last fantasy sci-fi world you played on. How will you survive? The last one I played is definitely World of Warcraft.
Yeah, it was wild last night, so I'd be my eccentric mage, so I'd just conjure food and be fine.
Yeah. I'd just be my druid, who can heal unbelievable amounts of damage that you fucking scrubs always stand in. So I think I'd be alright. Yeah.
That's the thing, though. My staff would just berate me constantly, which would be kind of alright because it's Matt Mercer. So
Yeah, I mean, I only get that one guy in Dark Card Thicket. Well, no, the 2 things happen with my staff. 3 things. First thing, like flowers and shit grow underneath me when I stand still. Second thing, that really nice tree in Dalaran keeps giving me free apples, so I'd have food, wouldn't even have to pay for. And last thing is that one guy in Dark Heart Thicket goes, "What is that you hold, druid?" But he's just weak now, even on Mythic Plus. You shit, mate. I win. I've got the stick. Next question. If a bunch of cats jump on top of each other, is it still called a dog pile?
the real questions.
How do you think? This one is from... I know I haven't asked if we're allowed to say who asked, but it's from our old concept art lecturer, Dave.
Ah,
Thanks, Dave.
Davey P.
I don't know how you think we can answer that. I don't know in what time we were your students you thought that we were qualified.
supremely qualified. This is what my project was about.
But yeah, I think it is, because a cat pile isn't a thing.
But what if it's loads of cats?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
I got really aggressive there, sorry.
Alright, read it in.
Would it be called like a... What's like the plural of cats? Like a swarm of
Cats?
cats? No, like when it's like a murder of crows or something.
A group of cats? A pack of cats? Swarm?
Cat pack. It's called a cat pack. Cat pack file.
I don't know what it's called. Oh yeah. A group of cats is referred to as a clouder or a glaring.
A glaring of cats. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
I
Or a clouder.
think... Oh, we have 2 more. Do you favour light-hearted escapist fantasy or sci-fi, or darker, grittier fantasy and sci-fi?
It's
I think everything's got its place.
Mm.
It depends what mood I'm in. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't always want to look at gritty, sad stuff and really realistic stuff. Sometimes I want to just, look at fairies and happy little space blobs and stuff.
I like the grittier stuff. Slimy, oily machinery and guys in space. His eyes are out. And gritty fantasy is nice. Like mud and all that stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
I don't mean just like dirty fantasy and dirty sci-fi. I mean,
With everything
like,
covered in shit and feces.
like sort of more realistic, gritty themes, like Blade Runner themes. That's a gritty sci-fi.
Yeah, okay. No, I get that.
And Harrison Ford gets all his fingers broken.
And the last one, what do you think of steampunk in games?
One of my projects in college was to do loads of steampunk, so I've had an exposure to it.
Exposure.
I like it when it's done in an interesting way, and by that I mean so it isn't just let's Google steampunk and it's the first thing you see. So like cogs sewn onto a jacket for some reason. I don't like that. But when it's done in a way that makes sense, and it seems like the civilization. Going back to the world building, strangely enough, if the civilization, if this is how they're doing it, they'd probably make it in a way that would fit that civilization. I mean, when I mean like that, I don't mean like. It feels like if it was a real thing, people wouldn't just like sew cogs onto the jackets for no reason. It would have some functionality to it.
I like it when it's integrated properly. I really do. It's something I sometimes get kind of random inspiration to work on a world that has it in, and then I remember that I'm not that into machines. I mean, I'm not normally, but I got this sort of weird obsession with sort of like turn of the century steamers and then the Titanic and those kind of built ships. I got really weirdly into that, so maybe one day I'll have some.
If people are into steampunk, there are a ton of other punk-related things. So you have diesel punk, which is super cool. Which is super cool. Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Think of a genre. There's probably something with punk after it.
Yeah, I've heard of octopunk, but I don't know what that is.
Octopunk.
Is it just like octopuses with cogs sewn onto them? Or?
I don't know what octopunk is. I'm gonna Google it. It's gonna be a risky Google. Octopunk.
Hope it's not just awful.
There's not. Do you mean Octopunch?
I have no idea. It might just be something I've deliriously thought of.
A lot of like, maybe. There's a lot of like octopus themes. Yes.
But yeah. I saw Jim Sterling play like a game based on Christianity, but it was like really steampunk.
Oh, okay.
And it was just like this like giant steampunk elephant, and it's like, what has this got to do with the Bible? And it was just mental, absolutely mental. And if you're going to make a game about Christianity, just do that. Steampunk elephants, steampunk horses, steampunk Christ.
Steampunk cross.
Oh, please don't everyone be offended about that.
Yeah. That's the game, that's a very bad idea.
We're not here to offend anyone. We just talk. But yeah, that's about it, really. There's quite a lot. There's more questions, but we've sort of talked about all of them as we've been answering the other questions. So sorry if it doesn't feel like we've answered your questions.
We mean ramble.
Yeah, if you sent me a super not safe for work one, Joel, then or whoever shall remain anonymous, I'm not going to answer it on this. We might do like drunk episodes or something later. If that's anything anyone would be interested in. But thank you for listening, and if you have any suggestions or replies or anything, please definitely contact us. I should give you somewhere to contact me. If you go on @SDBHOKU, that's my Twitter, so you can DM me on there, or if you know me on Reddit, you can just send me a Reddit message with questions. We should have prepared for this, actually.
Yeah.
I'll put links up for the next one, like proper places to ask questions and stuff. Maybe even give out my Snapchat or something, and you can ask me questions on there. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for listening again. Sorry if we've rambled. This is our first try, so we can only get better from here. But yeah, and if you'd like us to talk about things, or there's something you'd like us to mention, or you'd like to hear us talk about, then ask a question or suggest a theme, and we will.
We're supremely unqualified.
Definitely.
We will answer them.
Yeah, we just thought we'd record and see if it was fun. See if people liked it. If you don't be horrible, right? Because we're just people.
You might be. I don't know. No one really knows. No one knows.
We appear to be people.
Externally.
Yeah. So thank you. And anything you want to say, or should we just say bye?
I think we should say goodbye.
Right. Goodbye.
Farewell.